So as for the agenda, we will first do a quick summary of the novel, and then we will go through the method we used. Furthermore, we will make use of the nykritisk method, the biographic method. Then we will make use of Freud's personality model, Hans Gullestrop's model, and then we will discuss fjendebilleder, come to a conclusion, and finally show the sources that we used.
In order to make our analysis, we have been using both primary and secondary sources, as well as first and second-hand and background knowledge. In the descriptive level, we have described what is known to everyone, and throughout our different types of models and methods, we have started the analyzing level. By the use of knowledge about the author and the tendencies in America, we have been able to get into the perspective level. The first chapter of the novel, Americanah, is about Ifemelu, a Nigerian woman who has lived in America for 13 years. Ifemelu runs a blog where she writes about the everyday issues and the racial and fundamental prejudice she is faced with in her everyday life as a black woman living in the States. As a reader, we are told about her past and some of her social relations and how she has now decided to move back home to Nigeria. We follow her trip to New Jersey in order to get her hair braided, and from there we are yet to know what happens.
In order to interpret the novel and to analyze which layers are important to address, we have chosen to take use of the nykritisk method.
Storyelementerne lag. The novel is written in past tense throughout the entire story. However, the story happens in contemporary time, which is shown by the use of today's characters and relevant events, as she also mentions Barack Obama, which makes the story authentic as she takes use of real-life people.
The physical environment in the story is very straightforward. She takes us on a journey to the hair salon and explains the environment of different places she sees and thinks about. In the beginning of the story, she explains how Princeton in the summer smelled, as an example, smelled of nothing, although Ifemelu liked the tranquil greenness of the many trees, the clean streets and stately homes, and the earned grace. It was the lack of smell appealed most to her. Here we can see the use of many positive valued loaded words, such as clean, greenness, and grace. Move over in the text, there's an example of some negative loaded words. American cities she knew well had all smelled distinctly. Distinctly might not out of context be a negative value word, but in this text it is. It makes us feel like Princeton is superior to the other places. She also talks about where you see the most black people when you take the train, and how there are not any black people in Princeton. The use of America as a physical environment is also very relevant, since there is a lot of racial debate in America.
Fortællerholdningslag. The narrator of the novel is a limited narrator, as it is bound to only follow one character, which in this case is Ifemelu. As we can see in the text, we follow her thoughts and reflections. As an example, we can see on page 15 where they are situated in the salon. She doesn't understand very well, but Ifemelu could see from Aisha's face that she understood very well. This implicates that the narrator is able to follow both Ifemelu's emotions and thoughts throughout the novel, and we get an inside perspective into Ifemelu's mind.
It's almost like it's a first-person narrator. As an example, on the election night before Blaine kissed her, his face was wet with tears. He held her tightly as though Obama's victory was their personal victory. From this example, we get very close to not only her, but the person closest to her at that certain time, which makes her feel like that she's saying it and not the third-person narrator, which we say is meaning that it's implicit. However, it is debatable if it is explicit or implicit, but in the sense of this story, we think that it's implicit.
As a consequence to the narrator being limited, it is also very biased, and therefore we do not get an overall perspective of the surroundings, but a more enclosed and limited point of view. This is seen on page 12, where the narrator states that there is something strange about Aisha as they first encounter her. The reader does not get to make this assumption on their own, and thereby we get a biased point of view on the setting and characters in the novel. Udsagnet. The novel elaborates on the subject of separation and segregation in between races. Ifemelu is from Nigeria and moves to America, where she integrates and gets a fellowship at Princeton. She, however, still does not feel like an American, nor does she feel like Nigerian. This is sensed when she is in the need of a taxi and thereby states that she hoped her driver would not be Nigerian. This shows that she's not even most comfortable with people from her own country, and thereby the reader gets the feeling that she no longer is one of them. Marginalization is shown from the story as she does not feel like she belongs to either the American citizens nor the Nigerian.
The novel Americanah is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's third novel. Chimamanda is born and raised in Nigeria. She went to visit USA at the age of 8 before she returned to study at the age of 19. Americanah is written with inspiration from our author's own life and her own values. An example of this could be her opinion about hair. Hair is a very important part of the African culture. Ifemelu says in the novel that she does not want to use relaxer and wants to keep her hair natural, which is why she wants the color number 4, which is her natural hair color, instead of number 1 as the hairdresser Aisha recommended. She thinks it looks fake. Most African women do not wear their hair loose since it's a sign of untidiness, and the idea of wearing their hair natural is unbearable. This is also why so many of them sit in a chair for 6 hours getting their hair done. In an interview with The Guardian, Chimamanda states that hair is about self-acceptance, insecurity, and what the world tells you is beautiful. So for Ifemelu to use relaxer means that she would have adapted the American norm, which she has not. In the same interview, our author talks about how important it is to feel like you are belonging somewhere. She states that she did not think about identity at all before she went to the US to study in Philadelphia. This can be compared to a feminist saying that she did not feel black before entering the US. In the novel, Ifemelu thinks about how many people put other people in boxes, like with the black people that are just considered black and whose backgrounds doesn't matter. Only the fact that they're not white. There's an example later in the book where Ifemelu and 2 other black classmates are asked to comment on something from a black point of view. Even though they have 3 different backgrounds and opinions, in the end of the story, Ifemelu states, I stopped being black when I came back to Lagos, since she is now out of the box the Americans put her in. This is very equal to Chimamanda, who first started thinking about identity when she entered the US and was put in this black box.
So for the Freud's personality model, we speak of the superego. Ifemelu was raised in Nigeria, but later moved to America to live her life there, running an online blog and finishing a fellowship at Princeton. She is therefore ruled by both Nigerian and American norms, although lately she feels like she has left her Nigerian lifestyle behind and has become more Americanized. She stopped using the word fat to describe people and is ashamed to be around other Nigerians, just as an example. Ifemelu runs her blog with the superego in the sense that this blog consists of her unfiltered thoughts and opinions about the people and the society she lives in. As for the ego, without any particular reason, Ifemelu decides she wants to move back to Nigeria. This may point to her common sense, telling her that she needs to go back to realize herself. America has started to feel less like a home for her, and she needs to go back to her home country. And then we speak of the it. Ifemelu appears to be quite judgmental, sometimes consciously, as seen from her blog, although sometimes unconsciously, as she judges people before she gets to interact with them or even see them. For instance, when she gets into the cab and hopes the cab driver is not Nigerian, as they behave a certain way that she's uncomfortable with. Furthermore, she has tendencies to be a little rude or act rudely towards other people. Here we may take the example with the Senegalese hairdresser, Aisha, whom Ifemelu decides she dislikes and starts ignoring her when she speaks. She also thinks badly of her skin condition, imagining the rashes burning and oozing and others flaking.
And then we would like to talk about Hans Gullestrup's model. And in the first layer, which is the symptom layer, we find the behavior and environment of Infelu's life. The first thing that we notice in this novel is Princeton and several other places which all smell different according to Infelu. We are told about her everyday life and also her past, her boyfriend, her blog, where she has been and where she's from. Her looks and how she views other people is also portrayed. The next layer is the structure layer, and here we have to look at Infelu's social relations, which we are not told very much about. We know that she has a boyfriend, has parents both who both live in Nigeria and who are not very fond of the fact that her boyfriend is African American. It's kind of hard to tell how she feels about all of her social relations, but mostly her relation to her boyfriend is difficult to comprehend. We are told that she feels like being content in a house but always looking out the window, which indicates that she was somewhat happy about being with him, but at the same time was longing for something else. The way in which we're told about her relationship with Blaine kind of tells us that it is not only her want to go back to Nigeria that is pushing her to break up with him, but also some unspoken feeling that she might have or maybe have lost. The next layer is the moral and rule layer, and one of the sections where we are focusing on Infilu's morals is when she's looking back to when she was taking the train in New York, and she notices how white slim people are getting off on Manhattan and how fat black people were getting off in Brooklyn. After this, we're told that she did not think of black people as fat but used the term big instead, due to being told that fat is a bad word that is morally incorrect and in alignment with calling someone stupid or a bastard. Because of this, she's totally banished the word from her vocabulary until one day a man chose to call her exactly that word. She chooses to write a blog post about this, as she has done about many other similar situations where race, body type, or behavior has been an issue. Then we have the situation-specific values, which is about feeling that you're justified to say something is better than something else. Here we would like to point out Aisha, who when doing Infilu's hair seems to believe that she, due to being a hairdresser, knows which color is best for Infilu. Her know-all behavior continues until her boss stops her when braiding Infilu's hair too tight. Aisha has simply not adapted to the American customer service norms, and in that way she does not know that the customer is the one who knows best and is the one who needs to be satisfied.
The second to last point is the generally accepting the highest values. And in a way, the blog Ephemeru runs represents the social responsibility she feels with regards to informing her readers about how the people of America feel about race. Her blog is an ongoing study about race in America, and her thousands of viewers proves that she's onto something in her interviews. Race is one of the biggest taboos in America, and her blog is an attempt to break that with the help from humor and interviews from other people. And then as for the last point, we have the fundamental view of the world. Ephemeru views, to some extent, most white Americans the same way, skinny, lean, and in short, flimsy clothes. She has begun regarding Americans as more or less as a homogeneous people rather than individuals. She also has a view on African American people, noting how many of them are fat, herself included. She furthermore judges other African Americans based on the country they're from and bases her thoughts on them about.
Lastly, we would like to talk about fjendebilleder. America is one of the most diverse countries when it comes to race, ethnicity, cultural backgrounds, and religion, but despite this, the perceived picture of an enemy still persists and is one of the most discussed matters of all time. The novel Americanah portrays this issue in several aspects: body shame, racism, and disliking of ethnic backgrounds. Ephemeru, the main character in the novel, is originally from Nigeria but has moved to America more than a decade before the plot of the story. Besides being black, she's also being called fat by a man standing in line in the supermarket, which becomes the subject of one of her blog posts. Despite her own experience with body shame, she is not afraid to focus on other people's faults. At a train station, she meets a man who, probably due to aging, has gotten a bald spot on his head. And at the hair salon, the hairdresser that has to do her hair has a skin condition that Infilu notices in the instant she sees her. The way the novel portrays the mistrust, disliking, or prejudgment of ethnic backgrounds that you are not from yourself is by Infilu's parents, who does not appreciate the fact that she has found an African American boyfriend, and when the hairdresser Aisha, when thinking that Igbo men cannot marry people with another background.
In conclusion, we can decide that Americanah is a novel that tackles race and prejudice in a way that is easy to understand for anyone. The style of writing is innocent, but still perfectly shows great knowledge of the race relations in America from an African American point of view. Black people in America have for a long time been regarded as the outsiders, But with Ifemelu as the main character, a whole new perspective prevails for the reader, who might never have known what it is like for a black person to live in the white America.